You vicious fellow, get him off my back.
Don't you talk to me like that. Oh, Captain, give me the word. Just give me 1 minute. I'll have the words spilling out of him like blubber from a whale.
Right, George, nice to meet you.
Indeed.
Tell us a bit, first of all, about where you were born and where you grew up.
Grew up in Leeds. Date of birth, March the 7th, 1925. And as the time approached when you start thinking about having a job, I didn't have a clue, really and truly. There was a disaster when my father announced that he was going to pay for me to go to the technical school. I wanted to leave at the age of 14 with all my mates into any sort of blind alley job, etc., etc. But he thought, it'd be better to try and learn something. So I decided then, after sort of having a rough idea of what the technical school offered, I want to be an electrical engineer, because it sounded very impressive. I hadn't a clue as to what it meant. Anyway, when I did attend the technical school, I realised that electricity and I were not compatible, really and truly, sort of thing. So that finished. And then the next big idea was, how about being an architect? Because we're now into the early war years, of course, and I was aware that there was going to be a lot of building when the war was over, so why not get into it, sort of thing, commercial genius sort of thing. That faded again, because when I realised what you had to do, you had to pay this business of, you paid like a pupillage thing in the legal setup, which my parents could not have afforded, absolutely, so that dropped by the side. And then always in the background, I realised, years later, even at the elementary school in Headingley in Leeds, I was aware of, I liked acting. I was in all the school plays, etc., etc. And I even got picked there was one person, I think, from each of about 10 or 15 schools to do a pantomime. And I got picked from Headingley St Michael's to go to do this pantomime thing. The only thing I remember about it, really and truly, is that the director always wore a sort of a ginger brown Harris tweed +4s and all the rest of it. And when I played the part of Tommy Tucker, and one of the lines of the dialogue was, and then we can go into the wood and pick raspberries. No, George, we'll go into the woods and pick raspberries. Oh, all right, yeah. Right. Yes, we'll go into the wood and pick raspberries. So it was a bit of a strain trying to improve my North Country twang, etc., etc. So anyway, after that, I received a personal letter from His Majesty the King inviting me to join the army, which I did. Hadn't a clue as to what I was going to do, but because I'd been in the building set up by then, they decided I would be a Royal Artillery surveyor, otherwise known as a flash spotter. In other words, detecting enemy guns by the flashes, from the muzzles, etc., etc. And this landed me eventually in Dulali in India. And we arrived, I think about 10 days before they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. So I had just over a year, I think 15 months in Dulali. And even in Dulali, I couldn't stop this urge to do a bit of acting. And we had a very pleasant lieutenant in charge of entertainment, etc., in Dulali, called Joseph O'Connor. He only died 3 or 4 years ago, something like that. And he got the Royal Artillery Depot Players. So I was in a play by Lawrence Houseman or something, playing Lupo, the bandit chief, if I remember rightly. And I must have been horrible, I should think, absolutely pathetic. Came back to work, finished up in the drawing office doing reinforced concrete, and still thinking that, acting is all very well, but it's only a part-time thing. It couldn't possibly be a job. It just wouldn't work. But anyway, I got so disillusioned with reinforced concrete, sticking bars of steel in wet concrete, that I thought, well, maybe there might be something in it. And just as I had arrived back in Leeds from DMOB, It wasn't a full demob, it was only a Class B, which meant that I couldn't do what I wanted. I had to do something in the building. In other words, I was pre-released because of being connected with the building setup. I'd risen to the dizzy heights of having the national certificate in building. Wow. So anyway, I carried on for a wee while, for about 3 years actually, part of which was compulsory because of my early release. And I kept hearing about this company called Theatre Workshop, who worked in Manchester, with a very brilliant director called Joan Littlewood. And although I'd not actually seen them at work, I did blow over on one time and watched them at the Library Theatre in Manchester. And I thought, oh, that's good, they're really interesting. They don't mess about with box sets and all blanket lighting and all that sort of thing. They specialise in minimal sets, and they concentrate your attention with using spotlights and things on the stage. I might have a go, I might sort of risk it. So that is what I did. And I did an audition with my knees knocking, remembering, I think, 3 things for the audition. Piece of classical, Shakespeare, something like that, piece of poetry, and I think a contemporary play as well. And there's a rather ominous note on this notification of the audition saying, bring gym shoes and shorts. I thought, what the hell, what's going to happen? And the thing was, I hadn't realised that Joan was very interested in the work of a man called Rudolf Laban, who was the German state director of ballet and all the rest of it, pre-Hitler. Hitler threw him out, called him the erotic Jew Laban, and Rudolf Laban came to England, went to Manchester, started an art of movement studio, and got Joan interested in how to use movement on stage. In other words, she was breaking away from the traditional theatre, trying new ideas, etc., which appealed to me. So I did my bit in my shorts and my gym shoes, and I must say I was reasonably fit then, so all right, sort of thing. And I got a notification, we decided to take you on with your problems and all the rest of it and give you a temporary membership. I think it was 6 weeks or something. By which time they said, all right, well, we'll keep you on for another year or so. And eventually I did 6 years, well, nearly 6 years in the company. By that time we'd really begun to be recognised. We'd got our own little theatre in the East End of London, Stratford East 15, the Theatre Royal. And lo and behold, in 1955, we got the job of representing Britain at the French Arts Festival, and we took 2 plays, Volpone and a play called Arden of Faversham, which is actually based upon a true murder that happened somewhere around the 16th century or so. At times, people have thought that Shakespeare had written it, but it certainly wasn't his style. And it's about a wife who decides she's a bit fed up with hubby and has got a new boyfriend and employs 2 thick, useless hitmen to knock husband off. And I, of course, was one of the hitmen, known as Black Will, and the other one was Shakebag. It is a black comedy because we make about 4 or 5 attempts to knock him off, and each one fails. Eventually we do get him, sort of thing. But that was the Arden of Faversham. Volpone, I played Volpone in that and really enjoyed myself. That was super. We were very well received, and so all our critics in England had to admit that Theatre Workshop had created quite a stir in Paris and all the rest of it. We were invited to the British Embassy, inundated with drinks and all the rest of it. And Joan said we did that show that night in slow motion. Because so anyway, that was the acting bit. And then I married and I left Theatre Workshop. Was invited back several times by Joan to take part in things, but I didn't like the 8 times a week you do when you're doing a stage play. 6 nights and 8 times with the matinees, etc. And I thought I'd rather keep with TV. This was a new experience for me. So things like, the Doctor Who, etc., kept my interest alive in TV. I certainly have pleasant memories, what few they are, of doing the smuggling bit, apart from being smeared in the horrible makeup, which I did not like. And then from then on, I did a few films, got rather well in with the Welsh actor who was in Zulu, and he wanted me to play the Sergeant Major in Zulu, but it meant 16 weeks in Africa, the shooting schedule. And this, I'm afraid, I found throughout the acting bit, there's a clash between your domestic life and your acting life. And certainly my wife would not have accepted 16 weeks. She did come with me on one job we did in Switzerland, doing some voiceovers for a cartoon series. But apart from that, she would just have to stick it. In fact, when I went into the West End with Billy Lyer, we bought a dog just to keep her company whilst I was at work, because I used to get back late at night, of course. Peter Dews had used me in one or two things, and when Billy Lyer turned up, they had thought of another actor, another Yorkshireman from York, whose name, needless to say, I'm not going to remember. But Peter Dews said, well, you want George Cooper, he's from Leeds and all the rest of it. So I got the job. And I remember saying to my wife, it won't be lasting long. It's a North Country comedy. It might last until about the autumn. It hadn't finished by the autumn, it hadn't finished by that, and it went into next year. It ran for 15 months, I think, eventually. Keith Waterhouse and Willis Hall, who wrote Billy Lyer, like myself, were from Leeds. So playing the dad in Billy Lyer was just like falling off a log as far as I was concerned, sort of thing, being all from Leeds. I enjoyed that, as I say, because it was just like water off a duck's back, really and truly. I liked the humour, and although I would like to have done less than the full run, I had also to do, of course, the tour afterwards. And we got up to Aberdeen to play in the theatre there. And I don't know whether you know the script of Billy Lyer at all, but my character is, he's talking about Marlon Bloody Brando, and he's bloody this and bloody that sort of thing. And the manager said, Mr. Cooper, I believe there's a lot of bad language on this. Would you mind cutting it out? If you cut all the bloodies out of the father's mouth, there's nothing left. I did it for about 2 performances, I think, and then I thought, sod you, and I just put all the bloodies back.
What's up with you? I do not know our Billy. Oh, and that reminds me, have you told her she'll be very welcome for a Christmas dinner?
Well, I haven't mentioned it yet. The thing is, I don't think she'd fit in.
Hey, look, she's your bloody fiancée. You're supposed to be getting bloody married. But what's he talking about? He doesn't think she'd fit in.
Well, I just don't think she would in the family atmosphere.
What bloody family atmosphere? Any lord, you get her asked, you hear me right?
Yes, Dad.
And the next thing is you buy your Christmas presents before tomorrow dinner time. You buy one for your mother, one for Grandma, one for Barbara, and one for me, right?
Yes, Dad.
Now then, how much money have you got in your post office savings bank?
£5.
You lying little swine, you've got £10. You know, if you asked him what time it was, he'd tell you a lie. It's a bloody reflex action. Well, look, you can spend that £10 on presents. You can spend £3 on your mother's, 3 on your grandma, 3 on Barbara, and you can splash the odd quid out on me, right? You can get me some cigars if you want.
Yes, Dad.
They did a takeoff of that kung fu business, and there was an episode where I had to imitate the wise old man who was actually blind. They gave me these contact lenses with just a tiny little hole in the middle, and that was all I could see. I really was sort of blinded, sort of thing. And another occasion I remember doing a Z-Cars. I don't know whether they mentioned, because I was a goodie actually in one Z-Cars, the first one I did. I was a solicitor with Keith Barron as my son. But from then onwards I had a life of crime. I was a baddie all the time. I was an ex-boxer in one of the Z-Cars I did, and I had a marvellous scene where I was in a little superstore sort of setup, and I started going bananas and clearing all the shelves, swiping all the tins off the shelves. It's marvellous. But because I'd been an ex-boxer, in the script that is, the makeup lady decided to give me those hooded eyes, that boxers have, and that was really painful. So she put stuff to stick my flipping eyelids down, etc., which I've never been keen on makeup, frankly. And when we did Billy Lyer, I had to smoke a pipe as well. And Lindsay Anderson, the director, said, it really gives the character more sense. So all right, so I started. Being a non-smoker, of course, I was making myself sick. So they had to get for me Dr. Potter's herbal mixture. Thereafter, I was reasonably okay. The rest of the cast were sick because of the strange smell.